Let's install and configure Active Directory on Windows Server 2022. Before we start the actual installation, we need to prepare some basic things to reduce our future headache. No one likes headache. It's painful, literally. And yes, headache could definitely be a part of this package if you don't do it correctly. The first thing you should do is rename the server to the name it will be known as after Active Directory is installed. It is recommended for every Active Directory environment to have at least 2 domain controllers. And although you can name them John and Jane or Fire and Ice, I chose to name mine DC1. Open the settings to verify that this is indeed the correct version of Windows Server. Here you can see that my machine has the Windows Server 2022 installed. The next thing you need to do is handle any IP-related issues. You could potentially have multiple scenarios here. One scenario is an environment in which you already have a router that provides you with an IP address and your server is already connected to the internet. Another scenario is where you only have a router which is connected to the internet but no DHCP to provide you with an IP address. This would be an ideal scenario. If you have the first scenario, you will need to later disable the DHCP on your router while installing one on your new server. In this video, I will cover the second scenario. Please subscribe. To get started with the IP configuration, you need to know the internal IP address of the router. I'm running the ipconfig command, and as you can see, I have not received an IP address from a DHCP server on the network. Also, pinging Google's DNS has no response. Now that we identified our scenario, let's proceed with configuring an IP address. I already know that the internal IP address of the router is 10.0.0.1. As I mentioned, you need to know this in order to complete the IP configuration. Right-click your network icon and click Open Network and Internet Settings. As you can see here, this server doesn't have internet connectivity. Click Change Adapter Options, right-click your Ethernet adapter and click Properties. Double-click IPv4 and choose your first IP address. Since you already know that the router's IP address is 10.0.0.1, choose your new IP address in the same subnet. Click Use the following IP address and enter the new IP. In this video, I chose to use 10.0.0.10 as the IP address and 255.255.255.0 as the subnet mask. The default gateway is the router's internal IP address, which is 10.0.0.1. For the DNS servers, for now, use Google's public DNS servers, which is 8888 and 8844. Click OK, and then OK again to close these open windows. Here you can see the status of your server. It's now connected to the internet. Run ipconfig to verify, just in case, and also ping something on the internet to see that you actually have internet. Now that we got this out of the way, the server is ready to accept the role of a domain controller in your brand new domain. Go ahead and open Server Manager. Click Manage and then click Add Roles and Features. This will open the Features installation wizard. Before you begin this installation, you have to read the Before You Begin window, because it's meant to be read right before you begin. Don't disappoint. Read it and click Next. Here you need to choose the role-based option since you are installing a role on this server. Make sure it's selected and click Next. If you had more than one server, you would potentially have a list of servers in this window and will need to struggle and remember on which server you are planning to install. But my life in this video is simple. The choice has been taken away from me, and I only have one server in this list. Make sure you select the correct server if you have more than one and click Next. So here's the thing. Using this wizard, you can install 2 types of, let's call them installable items: roles and features. That's why this wizard is named Roles and Features Wizard. In any case, this is the roles installation window. From this window, choose the Active Directory domain services, which would be the most logical choice since you are installing the Active Directory role. A window will pop up as soon as you click that option, showing you the required features for this role. Make sure you include the management tools by verifying that this is checked. Tools are pretty useful, like a hammer to break an old monitor or a screwdriver to help scratch some sticker off a touchscreen. After verifying, click Add Features. Since this is the first domain controller, you need to install additional roles. Each role will pop up the required features window. Make sure everything is checked and proceed. The roles that you need are DNS Server and DHCP Server. The DNS Server will translate domain requests to IP addresses, so your web browser will know where to go. And the DHCP Server will be responsible to provide and manage IP addresses to other clients on the network. If you already have a DHCP server on your network, either don't install this role or make sure the other DHCP server is disabled before you enable this one. Clicking Next will open the features window. The required features by any of the roles you chose will already be selected here. Choose any other features you might need and click Next. This window shows several notes which you already know. The need to have more than one domain controller in any domain, and the requirement to install a DNS server on this server. This is basically a promo for Microsoft's cloud-based Active Directory services. Enjoy reading the contents of this page and click Next. This window briefly explains what is a DNS and why it is needed. Review and proceed. This window explains what is a DHCP server and provides useful notes. This note states that you need a static IP address on this server. You already did that in one of the first steps in this video. This note states that you need a plan for your DHCP server. I will reveal my secret DHCP plan when the time is right. Until then, just click Next to proceed. This window shows you a list of everything that will be installed on this server. It also has a few interesting items. Check this box to automatically restart this server when a restart is required. Click Yes in the confirmation window. This link allows you to export the configuration settings in an XML format for future deployments. When you are emotionally ready to take the next step in your relationship with the server, click Install. Windows is now installing the requested roles on the server. Note that you can close this window and the installation will proceed in the background. Once the installation is complete, you are presented with several required configuration tasks. The first and most important task is to promote the server to a domain controller. Installing the role doesn't automatically make your server the king of the domain. Click this link to proceed. Choose one of these options. If you are adding a domain controller to an existing domain, choose this option. If you are adding an additional domain to an existing forest, choose this option. And if you are creating a new forest with a new domain, choose this option. In this video, I'm creating a new forest with a new domain. After choosing this option, you can see that the interface changes slightly. Now, you need to enter a name for your root domain. There are multiple opinions regarding the naming of the domain. I'll just tell you what I think about this, and you could add your thoughts on this in the comments below. Since this is an internal domain controller, meaning it will be inside the network and will probably not be accessible from the internet, I will not use a real domain name here. Let's say you have a website called contoso.com. That won't be the name you should choose for this domain. Instead, you should choose contoso.local or something similar. It's an unwritten rule, or probably written somewhere, to use a .local name for your internal domain. That way, it will be isolated from any real domain name and prevent any naming conflicts. After choosing a name, click Next. These two drop-down lists show available forest and domain functional levels. Microsoft added functionality with each level upgrade. Like when playing a game, you get new abilities when you level up. Same here. Check out the link in the video description for more information on forest and domain functional levels and which items were added in which level. As a rule of thumb, you should choose the highest available level here to get the most out of your server. Type and confirm a directory services restore mode password. And don't forget to add it to your favorite password manager. This password will only be used in case of an emergency and provides administrators with a backdoor to the Active Directory database. This link opens a web page that provides more information on other domain controller options. Click Next to proceed. Ignore this warning for now. This option is grayed out, so you'll have to configure it later. Click Next to proceed. The NetBIOS name of your domain is the name without the extension. So if I move forward with the previous contoso.local domain name example, the NetBIOS name would be Contoso. Verify the name and click Next. This window shows the local folders for the Active Directory database, log files, and sysvol. Unless you have a specific reason to change these, leave the default folders and click Next. This window shows a review of your selections, and this button will allow you to create a PowerShell script which you can use in future installations. This file has the TMP extension. To run it using PowerShell, rename its extension to PS1. Click Next to proceed. The prerequisites check passed successfully, as you can see here. Review the results and click Install. The server was successfully configured as a domain controller and will now restart. After the restart, you can log into the server as the domain administrator. Local users are disabled on a domain controller. Now would be a good time to do some verification tasks. Start by verifying the IP configuration and internet access. Then open Server Manager, click Tools and Active Directory Users and Computers. Your domain controller is in the Domain Controllers organizational unit. Here is a list of default users and groups. As you can see, the administrator user is here. You can verify the forest and domain functional levels by opening the Active Directory domains and trusts. To see the domain functional level, right-click the domain and choose the option to raise the functional level. To see the forest functional level, right-click Active Directory Domains and Trusts here and choose the option to raise the functional level. A warning sign in the Server Manager requires us to complete the DHCP configuration. Click this link to proceed. The description window shows you what steps will be performed to complete the DHCP configuration. Review and click Next. Every new DHCP server in a domain needs to be authorized before it can start working properly as part of the domain. Choose this option to use the administrator to authorize, this option to choose another user to authorize, and this option to skip authorization. Make your choice and click Commit. The summary window shows the success of these tasks. Click Close to close this window. The next step is to configure the DHCP server. Click Tools in the Server Manager and choose DHCP from the list. When you expand your server and click IPv4, you see a message requiring you to add a scope. To add a scope, right-click IPv4 and click New Scope. Click Next in the Welcome window. Give your scope a name, description, and click Next. You should think of some sort of logic here, in case you'll have additional scopes in the future. You can change the name and description later if you want. In this window, you will need to enter a range of IP addresses that this server will provide to other computers on the network. Use the same range of IP addresses as this server. leave a few IP addresses at the beginning of the scope for future servers with static IP addresses, like this. As you can see here, this server will be able to provide these IP addresses to computers or other devices on the network. The first IP will be 10.0.0.50 and the last IP will be 10.0.0.100. Enter the length or subnet mask. In this video, the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0, so the length will be automatically changed to 24. Click Next to proceed. The exclusion window is not mandatory. You can skip this window by clicking Next. This is the place to create an exclusion range, which is a part of your main range. For example, if your range starts at 10.0.0.50 and ends at 10.0.0.100, but you don't want the server to provide to clients IP addresses between 10.0.0.60 and 10.0.0.65, you can add this new range in this window. Click Next to proceed. Choose the list duration in days and click Next. Choose Yes in this window to proceed with configuring the zone options and click Next to proceed. The router is usually the device through which you gain access to the internet. Enter its IP address and click Add. Note that the IP address of the router will be distributed to the DHCP clients together with their IP address. Click Next to proceed. Verify that your domain name is correctly entered here and the IP address of the DNS server, which is this computer, is entered here. You can edit any of these values and click Next. WinServer is a legacy service that has been replaced by the DNS server. Unless you are adding this DHCP server to an organization that uses Wins, you don't need to configure anything in this window. The only thing you must do is click Next. Choose Yes to activate this scope now and click Next. This window indicates that the new scope has been created. Click Finish to close the wizard. You can see your new scope here. This shows you the pool of IP addresses that this server can lease. Here you will have the list of IP addresses that are being leased by devices on the network. This shows a list of IP reservations. You have the ability to force a device to get a specific IP address. Those devices will appear here. The scope options are the options you configured for this zone. You can edit them or add new ones using this section. The Policies section allows you to provide different IP addresses following specific conditions. The server options are similar to the scope options but apply to all scopes on this server. Now, let's do some final touches to finish this properly. Start by checking the IP address properties of this server. Right-click the network icon and click Open Network and Internet Settings. Click Change Adapter Options, right-click the network adapter and click Properties. Now, double-click IPv4. As you can see, the DNS settings have been changed after the DNS role installation. Change the preferred DNS to the IP address of the server and the alternate DNS server to anything else. For now, you can use Google's DNS, but in the future, when you have another domain controller with the DNS role installed, you can use its IP address here. Click OK and then OK again. Now, close everything and open CMD to verify the IP configuration. ipconfig shows the IP configuration and pinging Google's DNS indicates that the server is connected to the internet. The last item on our configuration list is to configure the DNS server. Open Server Manager, click Tools and click DNS. If you expand the server here and click your new domain, you can see the server listed here. When you click the reverse lookup zone, you can see that it's empty. So go ahead and create a new zone. Right-click and click New Zone. Read the nicely designed welcome screen and click Next. Don't skip this step too quickly. It took years to reach this high level of welcome screen design. Choose a zone type from the list and make sure the option to store the zone in Active Directory is checked. This option creates a new zone on this server. This option creates on this server a copy of an existing zone from another server. And this option creates a zone that only includes DNS servers. Click Next to proceed. Since this is a new installation, choose this option. Here, you plan your DNS replication option. It can replicate to all domain controllers that have the DNS role installed in your forest, to all domain controllers that have the DNS role installed in your domain, or to all domain controllers in your domain. Obviously, the year 2000 is ancient history, so let's not choose this option. Make your choice and click Next. Choose this option and click Next. You can create another zone later with the same settings for this option. Enter the first 3 numbers from your IP address range, like this, and click Next. In this window, unless you have a specific reason to choose something else, choose this option and click Next. Read the summary and click Finish. And just like that, in a blink of an eye, your new zone has been created. Pause here to admire your good work. Give yourself a pat on the back and then proceed. You can see that your zone has been created but is empty and doesn't include the record for this server. Let's handle this right now. Open CMD and type ipconfig/register DNS. Now go back to the DNS server and refresh. Your server's new record is here. And with this last step, our Active Directory configuration is complete. Drop any questions you might have in the comments section below.